All right, let me look at this really quick. I posted my Twitch stream. Then now I'm going to start. Log in. All right, so I'm 85% done. I'm almost done. But yesterday we hit a little bit of a snag over here, so I'm going to redo this and also just review React really quick. What are the important parts? Some key definitions and stuff like that. So yeah, let's just get into that. Let's see. So since I'm redoing it, I'm gonna go to master, and then from master, check out a new branch called JS6 3. Yeah, that makes the most sense to me. So there's only one file, 1.js. Let's see. Let's see what's in there right now. These previous problems were approved and merged in, so I'm going to add them in to master. But since I'm redoing this section, I'm not going to merge this one in. So I'm just going to merge these two in. It seems like this already got merged in. Let me just make sure my branches are all good. So I'm going to go to master. Master is a branch where I make sure all of the latest approved code goes in there. So only it's like my place for all the perfect code. Let's look at my branches. The first problem I did here, P1, so git merge P1. The second problem I did here, P1-2, so git merge P1-2. Okay, so my master is good. And then now I check out JS6 3. Make sure this has all of the code in master needs to be put there. And seems like it's all up to date and we're ready to go. Yeah, so let's go over, before we start, let's go over the important stuff of React so we know these React really well. To do that, let me just add on to here. So this is loading a loading all the files in public. So I'm gonna create a file called public, and then create a folder called public, and then create a file called 3.html. And now I can run it. So now my website should be publicly available at cerny.com/3.html. Yeah, seems like it's working. Let me change some things in the file. Add an h1 tag, hello, Friday. Okay, so everything works. Let's start reviewing React. So first of all, React is a JavaScript library, and with all JavaScript library, you start by adding the script tag. And React, think of React as an engine, right? Like a car has an engine, a boat has an engine, it's just different mediums. And then React DOM is specifically for the browser. So when you're building a mobile app, you can still use React. You use the same engine, but React Native instead of React DOM. So just a heads up, this is why we need two. One is to compute, to understand what you're doing. And this React DOM is actually drawing out the input elements onto the page, onto the HTML page. So we want that, and we also need a third library. This third library is called Babel. So with React, we're not writing fully JavaScript code. There's a new JavaScript syntax called JS6, and that's something that is not JavaScript. So Babel helps you convert that into JavaScript. So that's nice. And then when you're writing JavaScript, here, see how we use type text equals Babel? That's to tell this Babel library that, hey, you need to convert the file. So here it is. And then to start off by writing React, it's okay. So React DOM comes from this library, is to display some things on a page. And then render takes in two arguments. One is the element that you want to display the things on. So this is root. So we need a root element. So div, give it an ID root. If you're not familiar with get element by ID, I usually do use a query selector, and if you select by ID, do it like that. And this is what I'm talking about with JSX. Like you see this tags. These look like HTML, right? But JavaScript has no concept of HTML. It's all functions, mostly functions, objects, arrays, and whatnot. So then if you only know JavaScript, this is gonna look weird to you. It's like, what is this strange angle bracket? That's not JavaScript that you know. And what this is a quick way to write const h1 equals document dot create element, like h1. I'm gonna create an h1 element, and then h1 dot inner html equals string hello world. Right, so this is just a shortcut to write these two JavaScript lines. So we write this shortcut, and then what Babel does is that Babel converts this into JavaScript. That's why we need them. Cool. And then we need to build a React component called stars. So here's a component. If you guys want, let's go over a few terms. Component. We need to build a component. We need to know what props are. We need to know what children is. And then what else? I think these are the important concepts for now. As more concepts show up, we'll build them. So to create a simple component, a component is the simplest component you can do is just a function. So a star, or just star, equals a function. This is the simplest component you can have. And this component will return h1 hello world. Right, so here we just created a component. And once after creating a component, to use it is really simple. You just type star. So now I am using my star component that I have created. Everything inside here is called the children. Right, so hello world 2. So let me just add children example. Okay, I spelled example wrong. So I passed in everything inside the tag. Inside this tag is called the children. And let's see it working without the children first. So here we created a component. The component is just a function that returns other components. That's it. And then to use a component, you just use it like an HTML tag. So now if you go to the website, you can see it says hello world, right? That's a star component. Okay. That's the star component that shows hello world. Now to get access to this children, you get it through the prop. So we completed. At this point, you should, at a very high level, know what a component is. So let me just take notes for you. Component is a function that returns other component. Like h1, div, what have you. It's important to know that you can only return one component. So here, I'm returning 5, and that's not allowed. So that's why it's important to say one other element. Okay, so that's a component. And if you need to return a bunch of elements, a bunch of components, you put them in a div. So once you do that, technically you're only returning one element, right? So if you guys check out the website, boom, still one component. Let me paste this in. Okay, cool. So now you know that. Let's talk about props. Props are information you pass into your component. So props like that. So if I pass in like something into star, like maybe I pass in like a paragraph tag, like amazing, beautiful star. Alright, so children is whatever you pass into the component. Just write this down for you. Children, whatever you put between the component tags you access. Okay. And then we also need to define what props are. Props are data for your component, or just, function argument, function parameter. So the first parameter your function takes in is we call it the props. It's just a function, so you can name this whatever, like my awesome data. Let's just call it my awesome data for now. And now if you pass in children into your component, then you can access them by, or let's console.log it. Console.log my awesome data dot children. Right, so everything you pass inside the tags, it comes in as your props children property. So now if I right click, inspect element, go to console, refresh, ta-da. Here's the component, children, amazing beautiful star, right? So to display a variable, so this is whatever the people pass into me. So like, depending on what they pass into me, I'm displaying what they're giving to me. So to display variables, you use curly brackets like that. So my awesome data.children. So it shows up. And then now, if I refresh the page, you'll say amazing beautiful star because it's the children, right? I'm displaying the children now. So hopefully this makes sense. So children, I guess, is part of props. So let me indent it a little bit. Okay. All right. So this is at a high level. I think these are important to know. So let's do another example before we dive in. You can reuse your component as many times as you want. So here's one component called div, and within div I have a star. I can create like other stars. I can, within this div, I can reuse my component as many times as I want. So star 1, oops, star 2, star 3, star 4, I think that's enough. Now if you go to the website, you'll see here's star 1, star 2, star 3, star 4. So you can use the components as many times as you want. And this is the real benefit that React gives you, is that every part of the page you can design into a component, and that component can be reused in everywhere in your app. You can even share it with other people. So if you can look, just Google for React component, and you can see other components that people have built for you that you can use. So here's a curated list of awesome React components. This one's only updated 6 months ago, so maybe this one's updated 6 months ago, maybe a little old, but maybe a lot of this works. Let's look at some of them. Notification. This guy made a notification component. Ta-da, this notification. So you can put this on your website, and all you have to do is to use it like, how do you use it? You use it like calling a function? Okay, you just call a function. Maybe this is a bad example. What about React Doc? What is that? Oh, that's an overlay. Tooltip, menu, sticky, tabs, loader. I think loader is fun to use. When data loads on your website, you want to use data loading a lot. And to use it, see, they create a component called progress label, right? So you just use progress label, just like how we're using this star component here. Instead of star, you use the progress label. So you can use the component that other people built for you. So it's like everybody is helping each other on the internet. So it's pretty cool. And then you look here, you see all this like attributes that you're passing in, right? These are called props also. So now we know how to pass data via children. Now let me show you another way of passing data. I can do star like trigger. You can make these up. Trigger equals a function, and pass in a function that does alert. Ouch. Right, so trigger is a function, so to access it, let's do set timeout. To run the function is just myAwesomeData.trigger. Right, so myAwesomeData.trigger, trigger is defined here, so you can pass in data. Everything you pass in as attributes becomes a key in this myAwesomeData object. Technically, we call them props, so let's just not confuse anybody. Okay, props. So props.trigger. Let's refresh the page, and we don't need this anymore. Let's refresh the page. Ouch, right? So, okay, cool. So in JS4, you guys, yeah, so now you know what children's are in data. So all the basic terms, at this point, I just went over. Now some technicalities. You know how previously in JS4 you do like const element equals document dot query selector, and then you select your by the class whatever blah blah blah, and then you do element dot on click equals blah blah blah, or either that or you do element dot add event listener to click event, etc. Right, you guys, we used to do that. And with React, you no longer have to do any of that. Here's the element itself, right? To just do an onClick, you do onClick equals. You just pass in a prop into the h1 element, h1 component. And since onClick is a function, right, you pass in a function into add event listener. Like, this is going to be a function, right? And then this onClick is going to be a function too. Like, it's all about functions. So in here, variable, like don't treat this literally, I'm going to pass in a variable, and it's just going to be a function. So alert, ouch. right? So this is a lot easier to write. And so if you go to the website and you click on Hello World, say ouch. Click on it again, it'll say ouch. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, cool. So with that said, I think we are ready to build our stars component. Let's build a stars component. And right now I'm deciding if I should talk about use effect now or later. Since we're defining everything about React, maybe we should do like talk about use effect. Oh, yeah, before we do that, there's one more important thing is state. Okay. So state is really cool. If you want, React will help you re-render your page based on the state. So if you want React to automatically re-render data that changes, re-render just means like, display the changes. So like, let's say I have a variable counter equals 0. And then I want to say like, which one? Current count is the variable. And I want to keep track of how many clicks, current clicks. Let's name this better. The variable is called clicks. By the way, if anyone have any questions, just ask on the chat, and then yeah, I'll do my best to answer. So current clicks is the number of clicks. Whenever I on-click, as a software engineer, I don't like writing my function into the component. It looks really, really ugly. I usually put it outside. So like cons on-click, I'll create a variable like this, and then clicks equals clicks plus 1. And then I'll pass in the variable like this on click. So this variable is a function. So I like doing this. That way my HTML looks the component structure looks very clean. So people can say, oh, here's what it displays. And these are the functions that are run. That's how I structure my code as an engineer. Separate it. Okay, cool. So now every time I click, like I'm gonna console.log clicks. Okay, so let's see it working. Current clicks is 0. Every time I click on Hello World, see the number of clicks increases, right? But this will never change, right? We need to tell React, hey, can you change it for us? In JS4, we kind of change it ourselves by doing like element dot inner text equals clicks, right? We used to do something like that, but in React, they want you to do it differently. So they force you to do things in a more organized way. So when you work with a team, in an engineering team, you can, everybody is more clear on how they're structuring their component. So it's easier to maintain the code. So with React to do state, what you do is const click array equals react.useState. So state is by a function called react.useState, and useState takes in initial state, the initial value. And so you're running the useState function, and the useState function returns an array. Returns an array. So I'm gonna start clicks at 0. So how is the array structured, right? Let's talk about that. Array at index 0 is the variable value. And then the array of index 1 is a function to change value. Okay, so the clicks is going to be click array at index 0. That makes sense. And then const set clicks is going to be array index 1. So these are, because React wrote this useState function, they say you should do it this way, you have to do it this way, otherwise it doesn't work as expected. It's not going to work. So if you want your app to work and you want to use React, you should follow the documentation. This documentation means how they want you to use their app. Cool, so now the value, clicks, comes from the array at index, the first element, and then the function is the second element. And then rather than doing clicks plus 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the setClicks function and set the new state to the new value. And what this does, whenever I call setClicks, what React is doing is it would run through this entire function again, right? And when it runs through the function again, this clicks is going to be the new value, okay? So to prove that it runs through these functions again, every time I click and it runs through these functions again, that means that this would get logged, right? Every time I click, this would run, and so there would be a console.log. So let's make sure that I'm right. So when I click, see, it re-renders a console.log, but not only that, because the value, when it ran the function again, the value is different now. This value is different, so current clicks, it's updated differently. It gets the new value. So as I click on it, it has its own value. So then what makes it more interesting now is if you have multiple stars, right? Let's say you have 5 stars. We don't need this trigger prop anymore. So let's paste this 5 times, we have 5 stars. So now if you look, every time we click on Hello World, yeah, they're all scoped within each other, which means that since this is a function, it has its own counter. This is a own function, it has its own counter. This has its own counter, right? And this has its own counter. So to update data, you use useState. Cool. So now we know about useState. Yeah. So now that we have useState, the next thing we need to talk about is useEffect. Okay, useEffect is really tricky because let's say when your component loads and you want to display a list of all the Pokemons. Let's look for Pokemon API. Let's look at the Pokemon API. Curriculum. I'm going to show you one of the most common mistakes in React. Okay, here's the Pokemon API, right? If I want to display a list of all the Pokemons, I'm going to show you how to do that. Yeah, so to do that, when my component loads, I'm going to send a fetch request to this URL, and then convert the response to a JSON object, and then then data. So log data. So let's make sure my data works. And I only want 1 star. Okay, so when I refresh my website, okay, it logs, the data logs. I need data.results to get all of the Pokemon. So let's get out all the names. const names equals data.results.map result, and I want to return result.name. Right, so console.log names. So now I got my names, right? But I can't put names, like if I want to do all Pokemon, right? And I want to display all the Pokemon, I can't do this. Hopefully at this point your foundation is strong enough to figure out why this would be an issue. But the explanation is names is displayed inside this function, right? So this fetch request takes time. So this function would run after your component loads. So when the component re-renders, it sends the request, sets everything up, and names is undefined. Right? So to solve this issue, let's get rid of these old things. What you want to do is you want to use state. Right? Use state, and then const names or Pokemon list equals click array index 0, and then this function is set Pokemon list click array index 1. So just to recap, use state gives you array of two elements. First one is the value, which would be an array, and the second one is a function. Right, so now when we get the names, we call the set Pokemon list function and we pass in names. This way, initially, when the page first loads, Pokemon list is an empty array, so it would display an empty array here if you do Pokemon list. Initially, it would be an empty array, okay? And then once this executes, after it gets all the names, it would run set Pokemon list, which changes the data. So React would run this function again. And then when it runs this function again, this Pokemon list would be the updated name. Okay, so let's prove our theory. So see, all of the Pokemon name is here, right? But then there is a problem. I don't know if you can tell, but this is sending requests forever, right? Even though we have the data, everything showed up. Why is this sending out data forever? Yeah, so I clear it and it keeps sending a request. Eventually, this is an attack called DDoS. If you have enough people doing this, let me just, be nice and stop it. Stop this nonsense. I don't want to hurt this beautiful API. Okay, so I refresh the page and now there's no more. There's no more. And then someone asked a question, why not use destructuring? I will. I think destructuring is better, but I'll get into that later. I don't want to throw in too many concepts. It might make it confusing. So the question is, why not destructure? And I will show what destructuring is afterwards. But just now we saw something where everything displayed correctly, but behind the scenes it's sending so many requests, right? Imagine if you built a website and you have 1 million users. Each user is sending you 1,000 requests per minute if you don't do it right. And now you're looking at 1 billion requests per minute going to your server, and your server would get overloaded and die. And then nobody would be able to access your website. So this is a very common mistake, and it's important to know what's going on to understand, to help you understand React better. So let's go over step by step like a computer what is going on. So when the star component loaded, the first step is sends a request. right? So first step is sends a request, and then after it sends a request, we call useState, and we get the set the state, and then we re-render. We render the page. Now after render, like when the request gets a response, so what happens is for response received, right? So now the computer is here, and then it's calling set Pokemon list. So update the state. Update the state. So it updates the state and it triggers the entire function to run again. So once update state happens, you're back to step 1 and it sends a request. Set the state, render, right? We don't want that. Yeah, so it sends a request, set the state, render, response received, update the state, and it sends, because it updates the state, it re-renders. Re-render, go to step 1. So that's the problem, right? Send a request, set state, render, and then after a while response is received, you update the state, you re-render, and re-render just means this whole function runs again, right? And then it sends a request, it sets the state, it re-renders. When the response is received, you update the state, you re-render, and you're going back to step 1. And the computer's doing this pretty fast, so this is why we need to use useEffect. UseEffect solves this very problem. Okay, so useEffect means if data doesn't change, don't run it. Don't re-render. Okay, something like that. And to help you understand how that works, let's go into this. So let's move this down here so it's more clear. So basically, this is the problem. We're always sending a request, right? Like sends a request, sets the state. What we want to do is we want to run use react.useEffect. React.useEffect is a function, so it takes in 2 arguments, function, and array of data. So let's write this down. Input is 2 arguments, parameters. Function to run, array of data. So the main point is if data doesn't change, don't re-render. So the array of data that you pass in is just telling React, okay, this is the data to watch out for. If this data changed, then run this function. If the data didn't change, then don't run that function. So I'm going to start it off with an array, and then run it here. But we can't hardcode the array because if we just always pass in an empty array, the data never changes. So this thing never really runs. Or maybe it does. We just want it to run one time. So, the first time. Or just an empty array. That would be fine. Yeah. So this would solve our problem. We only run it during empty array. So let's refresh the page. And you can see all of the elements showed up. And it only sent the request one time. Right? Cool. And then after I set the Pokemon list, so let's go through the computer step by step again. So it sends the request. It sets the state, and then it runs useEffect, and it passes in an empty array. This is the first time useEffect has seen this array before, so it's going to send the request, and then it's going to render, right? And then set state is called. A response is received. So it updates the state. And then it updates the state. It goes back to step 1. This is done. It sets the state again. And then use effect would see, oh, we've already done empty array before, right? We've already done empty array already. We don't have to run this again. So use effect doesn't run it again for this data. And then it re-renders with the new Pokemon list, and that's it. It's done. It doesn't call this over and over again. So hopefully use effect makes sense for you guys. This is pretty foundational to React. And I feel like if you know these 4 things about React, component, props, props you can pass in data directly with attributes or through the children. With state, use state returns. States help you update your value, your component. So, and then use effect prevents this loop from firing over and over again. So just this 4 concept, and you should be able to go pretty far with it. So we are done, and what you'll see a lot in a lot of engineering code bases is that doing this over and over again is really annoying. So JavaScript has a shortcut. So I'm gonna call it destructuring. So we know that React.useState is an array. So in the array elements inside the array, the first element I want it to be called Pokemon list, and then the second element I want it to be called set Pokemon list. And then yeah, this 1 line replaces that 3 line before. So this is destructuring. Okay. And then now, last but not least, these names look really ugly. Instead of just that, I want it to be a component, array of components. So const Pokemon names equals Pokemon list is an array, right? So I want to map the name to and return a component h4. And then inside, I want to display the name. And then instead of Pokemon list, which is an array of strings, I'm gonna pass in an array of components. Okay, so here's an array of components. And if you refresh the page, now I have an array of h4 elements. So if you right click, inspect element, it would show you that. If whenever you're displaying an array of components, you're going to get a warning because they want you to pass in a key property. So whenever you have an array of components here, you need to pass in a key. Okay. There was another question for use effect. I'm going to get into that right after I wrap up the keys. So keys, if you ever get asked in an interview, why do you need keys, right? It's because when you look at this step, like sends a request, set state, re-render, right? When your app gets really big, you don't want to re-render everything, the whole page, refresh over and over again. You don't want to re-render the whole page. So you really want to re-render what changed. And if only the Pokemon names changed, then only that changes. So here's the answer. Key props helps React to figure out during rendering or re-render, helps React figure out if there is a change. And if there is a change. If there is a change, we render that component with change. So change, in English we call it difference, right? So the one-word answer would be like helps React with diffing algorithm. Algorithm just means how they figure out if there is a change. So now, hopefully that makes sense. I'm gonna write this down for you guys so you guys can memorize this one thing. So key, because every element in the array have a different index, I can do name I. So the key is I, right? And then sometimes you might run into issues where even though your array changed, like your name changed, but React doesn't update. Like, why isn't it changing? It's because your previous key is 0 and the next key is 0, so React is not gonna do that change for you. So maybe like name plus I makes sense. So it's more unique. Okay, so here we have our array. So now there is no more warnings, right? We're good. Okay, question. First question is, what else is use effect meant for outside of promises? Use effect is not meant for promises. Use effect is meant to do this. Meant to prevent infinite re-render. Okay, so again, the problem why we in our example needed use effect is because when we send a request, set the state, re-render, right? And since we sent the request, when we get the response, the state got updated and we re-render. And then we go back to step 1. And these steps go over and over and over again forever. So use effect is to stop this from happening over and over again. So then you can't go to an interview and say use effect is meant for promises, because it's not. It's meant to prevent infinite re-render. So promises is a JavaScript concept. Use effect is a React thing. So hopefully that answers the first question. And then the second clarified question is, use effect meant only for async functionality? Most of the time, yes, use effect is meant for asynchronous functionality. So here, the reason why this infinite re-rendering happens is because it sends a request and it takes time. It's asynchronous, right? Everything re-rendered and then the data comes back and then re-render happens again and it sends another request and it takes time. So hopefully that answers that second questions. And then the third question is our key. We're talking about the key prop. Remember these attributes, they're called props, okay? So are keys always meant to be unique, like the ID attribute in HTML? If I fetch to the Pokemon API, keys 1 to 20 for the names, and then fetch. Keys doesn't have to be unique. So the question is, if I have two sets of data, like for example, here, if I do I, then for this array, let's say that there are 20 Pokemons, key would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 20, right? But what if I have another array, like let's say const messages equals, I have a bunch of message. ABC is a cool message, BCD is another message, and then XYZ. If I have another array of messages, map. And now I also want to return h4. Since I'm returning an array of components and I want to display it, so So the question is, but before I answer the question, it's important, like, let's make sure we're all on the same page, where I have an array of Pokemon names and I have an array of messages, right? These are messages. The question is, can they have the same key, right? So you look at the key here is 0 to 20. But if you look at the key here, it's going to also be, it's going to be 0, 1, 2. So then some keys here and some keys here are the same. And the question is it okay for them to have the same key? And the answer to that is yes, it is totally okay. Why? Because they show up in separate places in the app, right? So like Pokemon names show up here, messages show up here, right? They're in different sections of the page. So the key, when React does a difference, if they're in different sections, it doesn't even compare. They're by definition different. So it's okay for them to have the same key in different section. But in the same session, you cannot have everything be in the same key. Like if you have an array of Pokemon, you can't give them all key 0. That wouldn't make any sense. Let's try it and see what happens. Encountered 2 children with the same key. Key should be unique. Yeah, you get a warning. But if they have the same key, like if they have the same key and they're in different sections of the page, totally okay. So if I refresh, no warning. Oh, I meant message. Sorry, the message didn't show up before, so yeah. So no errors, everything is okay. Hopefully that answers all the questions. It is okay for components to have the same key if they are in different sections of the page. So these are good questions. I'm gonna write it down so that we all remember forever. Cool. And if there's no more questions, we have covered all of the important things in React. Okay. So again, let's do a recap. Component, prop, state, use effect, key props. These are important things. And with that, once you know this, we can easily build what is required of us. So let's actually start the challenges now. And the first part is stars. So if you're going through an interview and a lot of companies, they build their front end using React. So when you go for an interview and you say you know how to use React in your resume, they might ask you to build a star component, right? And just be careful when they ask you to build something, make sure you always start with the diagram first. Like, talk about it first. The wrong thing is, if you just start opening up your computer and start coding right away, it's not good. So don't do that. So first talk about it. So stars. I'm gonna have a stars component. Right, and then just go through each of these things here, right? Like, what props do I need? What state do I need? What do I need use effect? And what props do I need, right? So let's do that exercise. does my start component need to take in anything? Like input props? Nah. Maybe if we want to start our stars with an initial value. Okay, so during brainstorm is okay to talk about this and then make a decision like for now, but for now let's say no to keep things simple. This is what I'll say in the interview actually. I'm gonna assume that my stars component doesn't take in any props. Okay, so we established that. And the next thing is state. What state do we need? And if you don't remember what the app is like, let's go through the app. So here, I'm giving X number of stars. Do I need a state? Yes, definitely, because this is constantly changing, right? So since it's constantly changing, we want a state. And I think if I just, oh, and if I lock it, it doesn't change anymore. So we need a state to keep track of, is locked? Is it locked? And if I go back in, it's no longer locked, right? So I need a state. First state is it locked? And then I also need another state for the value, right? Like how many stars I'm giving. Value. Cool. And then that's it. And then how do I get the values I'm giving? So I will need an array of numbers. And this is not the state because the number of stars in this page doesn't change. There's always 5 stars. So I don't need a state here. So I need an array of numbers. Number values. And then when I turn this array into components. And then when I hover over each component or mouse move over each component, I would need to set the value, right? Or actually, I would need to check the state. Check is locked, right? If it's locked, return, otherwise we set the new value. Cool, and then the whole div. The whole div that contains everything, mouse. Oh, also in addition to mouse move, we need onClick. OnClick event we set is locked to true. And then we also set the value. And then also div on mouse enter, we set the is locked to false. Cool. So during an interview, I would talk about all of these first. I would talk about, do I need input props? Maybe I need input props, but for right now, for initial version, I'm gonna not put any. And if I have time left over, I can put that in. And then the state, I'm gonna need like a locked state and a value, how many stars I'm giving. Yeah, and then for each array of stars, I'm going to mouse move, check it's locked. I need an onClick event and div on mouse enter, set lock to false. And then after talking about all this, then I start coding. Okay. So star return that, and my star doesn't need a prop as we discussed before. We need a values equals first. Star number 1 has a value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Map. And then I return a component. This is the I component, and this I has a class name. In React, instead of classes, we use something called class name. So class name is FA star, and then FAR. I got that from, that was what I remember from here. Let's make sure. Stars UI, FAR and FA star. That's good. Got that. And we also need the style sheet to make it work. So let's add the CSS. External CSS. Okay. And then now let's just return like a div. And then inside the div is all the stars. These should be stars. And then after that, we have a paragraph tag. You are, or just a message. And then const message equals you are giving X stars. Okay. So this is very bare bones. Let's just make sure our stars show up. So yeah, let's do a sanity check. Make sure our stars show up. You are giving X stars. That's good. But I forgot to give it a key prop. So okay, give it a key prop. Now, like we said before, we need two states. So const value, set value. The first element is the value and the second element is the array. 0. We're going to set it to 0. And then we also need another state called is locked. And then this set is locked. You can name these are just variable names. You can name them whatever you want. For me, it just makes sense to do the value and then set value. So is state false. Okay. So now I need a function called mouse hover, mouse over, mouse move was a function. Okay, if it's locked, then don't do anything. Otherwise, run set value. We need to set value to what's the value here. So maybe we need to declare this function in here. And instead of mouse mouse, it's mouse move. And then the value is put in here, so val here. So now you are giving, can now use the variable here. And then component on mouse move equals the mouse move function. Okay. So you are giving 0 stars, but as I hover 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is good. We're able to hover over it. Now this FAR could either be FAR or FAS. So if the value of the star is smaller than or equal to value, then it needs to be selected, right? So let's do const class value. The class value is initialized to FAR, but if it's smaller, then class value needs to be changed to FAS. So let, and then this, since it's now a variable, I need a curly bracket. And then this needs to be a variable. class val. Cool. So now, depending on what the value is, it should change the, yeah, it should change, and it does. So that's good. And next up is I want to be able to click and change this to has given stars. So for that, I need an on click. And if you guys can probably see here, it's getting longer and longer, my props. So on click equals. And since it's getting longer and longer, what we normally do is put each prop in a different line. Cool. So each prop is in a different line. Yeah, this makes it easier to see. And then now const on click. We need an on click function. An on click function needs to set is locked to true, and it needs to set the value. Okay, so it sets the value. And then last but not least, this div, const div mouse move, or mouse enter. So when I go inside the div, I need to set is locked to false to make sure it's not locked. So mouse enter, on mouse enter is a function like that. Okay. So I set the lock is false. Now the message needs to change depending on whether it's locked or not. So let's do that. If is locked, then message equals you have given value stars. Bang. Cool. I have given that many stars. So now let's check it out. You're giving 3, 4, 5 stars, and I click on it. You have given 3 stars. I move, and nothing happens. And then I click 3, 2, and I move, nothing happens. Now when I go out and I come back in, do this again. So the functionality completely works now, and now people can start using it. Let's make this a little bit more pretty. So add a style to the top. FAS, I want it to have a color of yellow. Yellow is red plus green. And then I also need to give it a stroke, otherwise it will look ugly. Okay, let's see if this works. Yeah, you have given 4 stars. Cool. So now we knocked out all of these, and then if I have some time left over with the interviewer, I'll ask the interviewer, hey, we talked about this setting initial value for the stars. Should we do that? And then he would say, yeah. Since we have time, why not? And so we would add in a prop, like when someone use it, they can give us a value. Let's say someone says value 3 and someone says value 2. Right? So to get that, star needs to take in props, and then I do props dot value. If they give us an initial value, then I do props.value what they give us. But if they give us like an undefined or something, if they don't give us anything, it'll be undefined, so it'll be truthy. And then I use the OR operation. So if this is falsy, actually, if they don't pass anything in, this would be falsy. And if it's falsy, I want to use 0 as my default value. And also, if they give us a value, that means they have already selected a value. So my initial state should really be true in that case. So to do that, I just turn the props.value into a boolean. So props.value, if they don't pass anything in, then negating it. If they don't pass anything in, then negate it, then it becomes true, and then it becomes false. If they pass something in, then when I negate it, it becomes false, and then true. Right? So, if they pass something in, and then negate it, it becomes true. Wait a second. If they don't pass anything in, right, then it'll be falsy. And then if I do the opposite of falsy, I get a true. And then I do another one to make that false. If they pass something in like a 5, then I negate it, it becomes falsy. And then I negate it again, it becomes true. So if they pass in a value, then is locked will be true. If they don't pass in a value, it'll be false. So now if I refresh the page, if I have two components, see, these already have default values. So, and let's test one without a default value. Okay, let's show you. So you see how the first two says have given 2 stars, and the third one says you are giving 0 stars. So we are done with the challenge component, with the star challenge. Stars are done. Yes. Okay. So I have some chat messages. Twitch froze. Oh no. Nice. We are back. Don't know how much you guys missed, but I just implemented the initial prop value for the stars. And if you refresh the page, you can now put in default value for the stars. So now our star component, everything we talked about, we have done. So to help you see, to implement a default value, I just set the default value or 0, and then I turn the value that they pass in into a boolean to determine whether it's locked or not. Then we are now done with the stars UI. And then now that we are done with that, let's see if I can submit it. Part 2 is rebuild the Kanban board in React. Okay, so I'm gonna guess it's going to be rebuilding the Kanban board in React without the... Let's see how the Kanban board looks like. Yeah, so I'm gonna assume it's not gonna have this undo property. I think everything else, because we're using React, we should be able to finish it in 20 minutes or less. 10 minutes, we'll see. We're done with stars. Yeah, so the challenge says, like, based on the URL, oops. We need to go back. Let's understand the challenge a little bit more. It says if when users go to Kanban, display Kanban. When user go to stars, display stars. So the way we do that is it's hard for me to do that actually because we're going to 3.html. So how do we do this? Maybe like that? That wouldn't work because the express router is not set up for this. So I have an idea. I need to change some server code for setting up. So let's go do the server code. What I'm going to do is app.get when the user goes to challenge 3 or challenge 3 or anything in challenge 3, right? Request response. I'm always going to send back send file public folder 3.html. Don't know if this is going to work, but instead of challenge 3 is hard to type, just do 3/. Restart my server. Let's see if 3/ works. It doesn't work. Stars. Hey. Kinda works. Path must be absolute or specify root to res.send file. Response send file express. Let's see. I can just do, oh, I don't need a dot, so I used this wrong. Public. Alright, so now, let me see. Oh, it still doesn't work. I need to use root. I need to pass in an object. Okay, that makes sense. So I'm gonna send back 3.html starting from this path. Hey, it worked. Alright. So our server file is fixed. 3.html is good. Before I continue, I usually like to save my work. So git status, git add JS6 public 3.html, git add JS6 1.js commit. Implement server routing for challenge 3 and stars react component. Alright, so cool. Server is done, client is done. The next thing you guys need to know is client-side rendering. Oof. So because I set up the server to like for stars to show you some stars, and then for Kanban board it should show you Kanban board, but it sends back the same file. So how does your file know which component to show? You use the URL. So then that they just call it client-side rendering, but it's really just looking at the URL. So based on what the URL is, I need to send back render different component, right? So window.location.path name. So path name looks like this. So to figure out whether we're in stars or Kanban, we do dot split by the slash, and we just get the last element. So dot pop gives us the last element. So now we want to render an app component. So const app. And what this app does is const app equals. So I'm gonna get the path, right? So app path. Let me show you guys. So window.location.pathname.split.pop gets you the last one, which is Kanban. So if I change this to stars, then if I run the same function again, I get stars. Super simple. So if app path is equal to stars, maybe I want to convert it to lowercase in case somebody do like slash capital stars, like, you know, with a capital S. They want to be fancy like this. I want it to work for them. So if it equals to stars, then I want to return the stars components, which is this guy. Otherwise, I want to return Kanban board. But we don't have the Kanban board component yet, so let's create a h1. And then we're going to render the app component. Cool. So if I go to stars, I see all the stars. If I go to Kanban, I will see Kanban. Right, so we have implemented client-side routing. So using a app component. Okay. So now I guess the only thing that's left to do is build out the Kanban component. Kanban is a function that does something. So return Kanban. So let's set everything up. And okay. So let's refresh. Cool. So now we have our fresh Kanban board. If you guys have done this challenge already, you probably know what needs to be done. You probably already know how it works. So again, we need to talk about the Kanban component. This is really hard to type. Let's try this one. Kanban. Do you need props? I think we do. Yes. And the props need to come from local storage. Because when board loads, we have 2D array of to-do strings from local storage. Cool. So Kanban takes in an array like Kanban data equals, and then we pass in an array of strings. 1, 2, 3, 4. So Kanban takes in those number of props. Or maybe Kanban, is it optional? Do user have to pass it in? No, they don't. So they can also do Kanban without passing any data. And that's fine too. That's if local storage is empty. Okay, so now in Kanban, what state do we need? So each board needs a state. So we need a global state. Need a global state. Yeah, so state is really a 2D array of data. Cool. Okay. So state is 2D array of data, and then I would have a add function. Does Kanban need 4 boards of to-do elements? Yes. So we need a board component for the board, and the board would have, and this board, when we create it, we would need to pass in some props, and the props that we need to pass in is we need to know when a new item has been added. Maybe, do we? No, we don't. We actually don't care. Do we need to know when an item has been removed? We actually don't care either. Do we need to know if it's been moved? Yes. So, onMove. So we need to pass in an onMove function to know when it has been moved. And then we also need to save back to local storage, so we need an onChange function. Prop. And if each board has its own state, then the Kanban board itself doesn't need a state. So no state. But the board has state to do items. Cool. And I forget if you need to, are you able to edit the Kanban board? Let's see. Oops, it's already here. Okay, when I click on it, it's just delete. There's no need to edit. It's good. Cool, I think I'm ready to start. This Kanban board is actually really simple. It seems like in React. Yeah, so if I want to do a Kanban board, const Kanban data equals window dot local storage dot get the Kanban data, and then if it's empty, I'll initialize it with an empty array, and then JSON dot parse. So data equals Kanban data. So now if I have Kanban data now, my Kanban board would take in props. And then if props exist, and but it so we let boards data equals array. We create 4 arrays, and then if the props exist, so props dot data exist, and props dot data dot length is equal to 4, then boards data equals props dot data. So this way, if somebody passes us data into Kanban, we can set our initial state to the Kanban stuff. And then const boards equals boards data dot map board info, and we just return an array of boards. So board data equals, I pass in board info. Okay, so I have boards, and then I just create a div inside of this boards. Okay, so but since it's an array, I need to pass in a key. Key is I. And now we need a board component. And board component will return this board component is going to need a title. So h div h1 hello. So let's just do hello for now and see if we can get a series of boards. Okay. Window.localStorage.get is not a function. Let's get item. Okay, so we have 4 hello boards. Now we just need to add in some CSS. The main Kanban board, let's give it a Kanban class, and then give each board a board CSS. So Kanban board is display flex, and then the display flex dot Kanban board will have width 100%. Okay, let's see if this works. This works. I don't really want to build the Kanban CSS again, so I'm just gonna cheat a little. This already has the Kanban CSS, so why don't I just take this? Okay, so instead of building my own Kanban board, I'm going to use their CSS. Alright. So now that we know how their CSS works, we need to know how their elements work, so we can do it the same way, and then we would have the elements working. So each board has a to-do list container. So where's my each board is called a to-do list container. This is how it's spelled. Yes. And then it needs to have a title with background color. And then it needs to have input container. Okay. Let's see how we're doing so far. Okay. Our elements look nothing like theirs. Why is that? I think it's because my root is too small, because body is display flex. I don't want body to display flex. Okay. So I need to overwrite the body CSS to protect my own. So after the script tag loads, I'm gonna overwrite the body. I want it to be display block, and then margin to have 0, padding to also be 0, and then instead the Kanban CSS that will have display flex. Margin 30,000. And then the padding is 0, so let's see if this makes our CSS better, and it does. So now we're off to the races. So here's the to-do. The to-do list container inside, it needs a title and it needs an input container class. So let's do div title. So I give it a title and then input container. Okay. Cool, they're all blue. Alright, so we have an input container, and inside the input container there's two. There's a text area and a button class. So let's make this easier to read. Text area and a button. Nice. So we have our text area now, and then yeah, we can work with that. To do, doing, done, approved. So the Kanban, I need setup cons. We need to let each board know which ID they are. So board ID. Let's pass in board ID equals I. And then so const board ID equals props dot board ID, and then const. So I have the board ID now, and then after board ID I can get data. Title color equals title info at index board ID. Okay, so I need a title info. Const title info equals an array, and the first element title is going to be to do. Color is that. Okay. The second is doing. The third one is done, approved. And doing CSS is background is that color. It's red, purple. And then I don't know what color that is. So approved is that color. Done is that color. Doing is that color. So now we have this title info variable. The title could be the title variable, and then style has a background color of color pixels. Okay, so the title showed up, but then the color doesn't seem to apply. In in React, you can pass in a style prop, and then prop you can pass in CSS property like background color, and this background color value is a string. So this might be hard to see, but const style, let's create a variable. Maybe this is easier to understand for me. Style is an object where the key is called background color and the value has the color specified here in the pixels. So it's a string. Style would be the style variable. And if I refresh the page and it still doesn't work, that means there's something wrong with my style variable. So let's console.log that. It looks pretty good. Oh, it's not pixels. What am I doing? It should just be the color. Background is the color. That's it. Pixels is for sizes. Okay, cool. So now this is good. We are able to do stuff. So now we pretty much just, when we add stuff, click submit, get the value, right? So the question is, how do you get the value from the text area? That is a good question. There are two, because you don't have document.query selector. So let's just do what we know. Add to do is a function that, and then when you click on the button, you run the add to do function. And then add to do needs to get the value from the text area. How do we get the value from the text area? I think we need a state. So const to do value equal and set to do value equals react.use state. Start off with empty string, and then text area. Whenever something changes, update input. The text area. So let's create that function, update text area. And then whenever this function happens, there's going to be an event. So let's console.log event.target.value to see what this is, to see if we're getting the changes we type. So type, we are getting the changes as we type. This is great. So then we set the value of the text area to be whatever our to-do value is. This way, as it changes, it would update the to-do value. And when I add the to-do, I'm going to set the to-do value to an empty string. And then as I update the value, I'm going to be running set to-do value. I'm constantly going to be updating the to-do value here in the state. So let's see if that works. I type, and when I click on submit, then it's gone, right? So if I click on enter, I also want to do the same thing. So can I console out? But that's too much work. I'll do that later for enter. So now the boards also need a array of to-dos. So and these are state, so to-dos, set to-dos, and then I'm gonna start it off with an empty array. So every time I push a value, I need to do set to-dos with whatever the previous to-do value was, and then plus a new value, which is the new to-do value. Cool. So now our state changes based on whenever we add a to-do. It's that simple. And then in here, I want to have a list of to-do, right? So to-do components. So const to-do components equals to-dos dot map. For each to-do string, I'm going to return. Let's do h4 for now to keep it simple. Okay. Now as I add things in, see, I can add things in. This is good. This is a good start. And I'm not sending in the key prop, so I should send back the key prop. Cool. Now to-do has a key. So whenever I type something, there's a key to-do key prop passed in the to-do element. So my adding works. I just need to do delete and moving, and I'm done. Okay. So how do we add? Oh, I need the styling to work. I need a to-do component. And looking at this HTML, I need a to-do container. Okay. I need a to-do container. So div, and the class name is to-do container. And inside the to-do container, I need a div with this. So div class name equals swap left clickable, swap right clickable, and then in the middle it's center clickable. So, and then this is the to-do. Now going back into my app, if I add something, whoa, what happened to my left and right buttons? Is my HTML looking the same? My to-do container has a swap left clickable. Oh, but inside I need a ampersand less than. So ampersand less than, and then ampersand greater than. So add a to-do, yeah, it shows up. Nice. Okay, so this is good to go. I need to add an on-click left and on-click right here. Okay. I'm trying to think. Oh, there was an error where I need the key prop. There you go. That was what I wanted to do. Because if I look at the console, it looks really ugly. Okay, cool. This is great. So now I'm going to change up the local storage so that I'm actually setting the local storage here. Right now I don't have any Kanban board local storage, so maybe I should just use the all items. Now let's just create my own. So when I load up the data from the local storage, I'm passing the data into each board's info, right? So then board info, the array would always exist. So now the to-dos, instead of making it an empty array, I should be initialized by props.data. Props.data here. And every time it changes, anytime the board information changes, I need to update the parent that like, hey, my board changed, right? So I need to pass in another property called onDataChange. So let's make this easier to read. Okay. Const onDataChange equals a function. And this function, I need to know which board changed. So, well, actually I don't, because I have the I here. So, but I need to know the new data. So new data. And then board's data at the index of that board is going to be the new data. And then window.localStorage.setItem Kanban. I want to set all of the board's data. JSON.stringify board's data null. Oh, what am I doing? Okay. Cool. So every time there's new data, I update the boards and then I set the local storage. So on data change. And now every time I every time I add a to-do, and the to-do elements const new data values equals. So I'll put new data values here. And the reason why I do this is because I can't use to-dos because that would be old. The component hasn't rendered yet, so I can't do that. Props.onDataChange, and I pass in the new data values. Yeah. Okay. So after you call set to-dos, these to-do doesn't re-render because we're still in that function. It's when you set the state, the new state, after the function runs, then when the board re-renders, that's when to-dos get updated. So I couldn't have passed in to-dos because that would be old data. I want to update it with the new data, so I needed to create an array. And if everything works out now, when I refresh the page, to-do, add, delete. When I click submit, it should load up the local storage. It does, add delete functionality. And if I refresh the page, it should be there, right? So left and right arrows displaying correctly. That's another one I need to do. And again, when I refresh the page, everything works. And then move left and move right. And then I'm done. So delete functionality is really simple. If I click on an array, then I'll just do so const delete So on click equals delete if we want to warn user, are you sure you want to delete the to-do item? If they say no, then don't do anything. Otherwise, new data values equals. So we make a new copy of the existing state, and then we want to do new data values dot splice at index I, one element. Right? And then after that, we want to set new to-dos, and then let the parent know that the data has updated. Set new data values. Okay, let's see if delete works. Oh no. Unexpected token happened here. It thinks delete to do. So delete is a system keyword. Okay, so I'm gonna try to delete this. Let's try to delete the middle one. Okay, and it's gone. If I refresh the page, yeah, left and right arrows should render. Okay, so this is doing. Oh, I added the delete on click to the wrong place. So it's really here. Right, so delete functionality. Oh, I can't move left and right, so I need to add that functionality. If I move left, I'm pretty much deleting myself at its current place and then calling move right. So this one should be pretty simple if I do it correctly. So let's do on click equals move left, and then here on click equals move right, and then I create two functions, const move left. Alright, so when I move right, what I'm essentially doing is I'm deleting my current value. So to delete the current value, I've already done that already. So move left. I'm going to delete the current value and then set the new to do with the new value. And then I need to let the parent know, like, hey, I moved left. So moving left, I need to let the parent know. So I do props.move left. Boom. And then move right is just the same thing, but props.move right. And since we're calling the parent elements for props.move left and props.move right, I need to let them know that there's been data changes. So the parent needs to move left and move right. And then, where's the Kanban? Okay, here. So move left equals move left function. And then move right equals the move right function. And I just create two functions, const move left. And then move right function. So what the move right function needs to do is the board info needs to change. Oh no. So we need to change the board info by changing the board's data, which means board's data dot which means we need a state for each board. But first, let's make sure that it works. Let's at least set the local storage. So if I move right, so the next board I plus 1, needs to push the new value into it. So I need to do value. And then when I move left, this needs to push. And then I set the item. Okay. And since when I run this function, I need the value, so I need to make sure when I move right, I call it with the to-do, with the actual element that I'm moving. Okay, so everything should work. If everything works well, then yeah, let's see. If I delete this, if I move this to the right, this would disappear and nothing should happen here because the state didn't change. But if I refresh the page, it should work. So I'm going to move it right. It deleted, that's good. But if I refresh the page, it should show up here. So how do we re-render the page? And to re-render a page, you just set this to the initial state. So like const let's do initial boards data equals that, and then boards, we need to use useState. Boards data set boards data equals react.useState, and then react.useState would just be pre-filled with initial boards data. And so now every time there's a move right or move left, we just call set boards data with the new value. So here's the new value, move right and move left. So then if we want to set the new value, just call set boards data and pass in new boards data. And we do that for the same here. And that should fix the issue where we move right or left. So delete functionality is approved and tested. Move left and right is done and tested. And then when I refresh the page, things should look exactly like this. And now I'm gonna really quickly do the left and the right arrows and I should be done. So let's quickly do the left and the right arrows. So const let left arrow equals nothing. And then if index is greater than 0, then it shouldn't have left arrow. So left arrow equals to that. And then the same with right arrow. And then right arrow equals that. Make it a variable. And then change. Cool, so now my left arrow and right arrow are there. And now, whoa. None of them works. If I is greater than 0, what is I? Yeah. I is greater than 0, there should be a left arrow. Why isn't there a left arrow here? Oh. It should be board index, not I. And board index is board ID. So board ID greater than 0. If board ID is smaller than 4, I think I have it mixed up. If board ID is greater than 0, we want a right arrow. Yeah. So if board ID is smaller than 4, we want a left arrow. It's an easy fix. Okay. And now, yeah, I did mix it up. So left arrow, if it's greater than 0, I had it right. Right arrow when it's less than 4. Whoops. Okay, left and right arrow should render correctly. I'm doing it, and I did it, and then I finished it. I refresh the page, and everything is good. Add delete functionality. We're done with this. Done with this. Oh, refresh the page. We are done with this. Okay. So took a little bit longer than I thought, but we managed to finish it. So solves problem 3 of JS6. Click submit JS6 problem 3. Stars and Kanban. Okay, this was a long one. Oh, there is the right arrow showing on the approved container. Ooh. Good catch. So someone noticed that there's a right arrow. So we set the right arrow, and if board ID is equal to 3, then we set right arrow to null. Now there's no more. Thanks for the catch. Now I think we're good. Git commit fixes right arrow issue. Submit. Alright, thanks for watching. We only got one challenge done today, but hopefully tomorrow we have our ball rolling. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.